Hi dear audience, hope you would be fine. Today we would be discussing, having a conversation on what is the literature. Actually, there are different perceptions, definitions, conceptions, and theories and the philosophies about the definition of literature. So, every school of thought has its own, sort of interpretation of fiction. There are some people who takes that anything that is written, that's called a literature, and there are some other ones who says that if everything is what is written on the page, that is literature, then can the menu of a restaurant be a literature if it is in the written form? So the other says if anything is written, which is written and it is imaginative and artistic, that's the literature. Then there is the other counter philosophy or counter theory with this, that as since the history of human being, oral tradition, folks and ballads has been the very initial trier or some sort of data of the literature. Then how we can exclude that oral literature from the definition of literature? So we would be discussing all these conceptions. First we would be moving with the definition, and then different philosophies, and that after that we would be moving to our conclusion. Many critics assume that literature is simply anything that is written. Thereby declaring a city telephone book, they consider everything in the literature that might be the city telephone book, a cookbook, and a road atlas to be literary works, along with David Copperfield and Huckleberry Finn. Means from lower sort of any written piece to the higher David Copperfield, which is written by Charles Dickens, they consider everything as the literature. They say that the original word literature has been taken from the Latin word litera, means letter, and rooted meaning with of the literature means the word literature means anything that is written. Therefore they focus on the epistemological or the ontological sense of the literature. Therefore they refers primarily to the written word and seems to support this broader definition. But we, as I already has pointed out, that anything that can be written cannot be the literature. So there are some misconceptions about literature. There are other ones who says that literature is imaginative. Literature has imagination in its sense. So if it is imagination, totally it's based on the imagination, then what's all that reality? How it can be an agent of morality? So all these definitions. Such a definition, however, eliminates the important oral tradition upon which much of our literature is based. For example, Homer, Iliad, and Odyssey, the English epic, Beowulf, and many Native American legends could not, by this definition, be considered a literature, while at the same time, though these texts have been, or though these tales have been or in oral form, but these are considered as the foundational text of literature. Still, we asked whenever we start teaching of literature, we start from Homer, from Odyssey, from Beowulf. So how we can say that they cannot be the literature and they are not the great literature? So to solve this problem, others choose to define literature as an art. So this is the third perspective of literature, thereby leaving open the question of its being written or oral. Therefore they say that literature may be art, may be written, or it may be oral. This further narrows its meaning and equating literature with the works of imagination of creative writing. By this definition, written works such as telephone book or the cookbook can no longer be considered as literature because they are not imaginative. Therefore, they take poetry, drama, fiction, and other types of writing, means imaginative types of writing, as the literature. Although such a narrowing and an equating of the definition of literature to the art seemingly simplify that what can or cannot be defined as literary, such is not the case. That the Banana Republic clothes catalog is imaginative. You might have been seen some imaginative pictures on your t-shirts or some on the clothes of the babies. So those pictures or those words may be more rhymed, maybe more imaginative, but we cannot name those as the literature. So imagination is not the sole element of a literariness. So defining and narrowing the definition of literature as being a work of art does not immediately provide the senses or consistent rule concerning whether or not a work can or should be considered a work of literature. So if we count down that literature is not only the written form, literature is not only an imaginative form of writing, literature is not only the artistic form of writing or representation, and literature is not only is not only a definition of some concise preoccupation, some focused idea. Whatever accepts the broad or the narrow definition may argue that the text must possess, this is very important, particular qualities. For example, it should be written, it can be oral as well, so it has some character, it has some imagination, it has some theme, it might be the realistic, it might be the imaginative. So all these character means literature does not hold any single characteristics. There might be some particular characteristics, some devices might be there which makes it more some sort of literary. Means if there is literariness in a text, that would be literature. So the only difference between journalism and literature is that even some school of thought says that there might be the literariness in journalism, but literature is always specialized in imagination, specialized in morality, specialized in its style. So for example, artist creation or the secondary word often mirrors the author's primary word, the word in which the creator lives. This is more important, therefore I have highlighted it. Means, for example, I am a common man, I live in a street, I live in a small house, but I create another word which might be similar to my realistic word. I create another word where I face the same problems, but I cannot be disappointed. I might have been enjoying those problems. So means the fiction writer or the literary person, means the person who writes the literature, he creates another word that might be the similar to the real word, but it to some extent it would be the new one, it would be the other word. Means it is blended mixture of reality, means the primary word, and imagination in the sense of the secondary word. So reality or the primary word is highly structured, so must be the secondary word. To achieve this structure, the artist must create a plot, character, tone, symbols. These are certain particular qualities which I have already talked. Might be the necessary elements of a fiction, of the literature. Conflict and the host of other elements are the parts of the artistic story. With all of these literary elements working in a dynamic interrelationship, here it's more important that one element is going to correlate or is going to more effective one to the other elements to produce a literary work. It is the presence of these elements, some would argue, that determine whether or not a piece of writing is literature. So all these, for example, elements are there. For example, story is artistic, characters are there, tone is there, symbol is there, conflict is there, plot is there, and many other such other interrelated relationships. And it is imaginary, it is to some extent realistic, it is more circumference the social issues, it is more projecting a new word. All these elements would make it as a literary text. So by up to here, taking all these points, we can say that a telephone book cannot have such all these things. Means a book of telephone directory cannot be the imaginative. It might have a precise information, it might be the written one, it might be carrying, or it might be having some maps of the city which might not be known to the reader. For example, if I am going to look at the map of telephone directory, and there I see a map picture of Scotland, and I have never been to the Scotland, so the land of Scotland would be new for me, that would be imaginative for me. But if it is on the telephone directory book, it cannot be a fiction, it cannot be a literary text. It might be the written, it might have information, it might be to some extent, to a very limited sense, it might be imaginative as well for the reader, but it cannot be the literary one. So the literary text should have plot, tone, symbols, conflict, all these elements of literariness. So what this work may contain is peculiarly aesthetic quality. In some other lecture I would be talking about this aesthetic quality. Means what is aesthetic basically? That it distinguishes as literature from other forms of writing. Aesthetics, that branch of philosophy that deals with the concept of the beautiful, strives to determine the criteria for beauty in such a work of art. So aesthetic is also relative. What might be your conception of beauty cannot be my conception of beauty, but there are some universal conceptions of beauty. This is very important to understand. For example, in one of my lecture I have talked that there are different sizes of humans. Man can be, means human can be of 3 feet and can be of 7 feet. But a human can never be, and between these categories from 3 feet, from 2 feet to 7 feet, there are different variations. Every human have its own weight, has its own color, has its own physical structure, and it can be from 2 feet to 7 feet to 8 feet, even to 9 feet it can be. But a man can never be of 70 feet, 50 feet. So your conception of beauty might be your own, but my conception of beauty might be my own. But what is between you and me, what's common between you and me, that is the love for beauty. So all humans to some extent are attracted towards the beauty, and as there are different types of beauties, so there are different definitions of the beauties. So theorists like Plato and Aristotle declare that the source of beauty is inherent within the art object. So this is another definition. Some says that beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and some says that the beauty is more lies in the object. However, in an upcoming discussion we are going to negate it, that beauty is not in the objects and beauty does not lie in the eye of the beholder. However, whatever is the beauty, beauty is common and among to all humans. While the other critics such as David Hume decree that the beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and some 20th century theorists argue that the one's perception of beauty in a text rests in the dynamic relationship between the object and the perceiver at a given moment in time. For example, in the childhood, in our youth, we might be in love of something. For example, in childhood, we love chocolate to a very great extent. But when we are old, we might not be having that charm towards chocolate. So means if you are in a particular situation, the modern critics say that if you are on a particular time frame, you having strong association or strong drive for a particular object, a person, that would determine your definition of beauty. Whatever the criteria for judging the beauty of a work of art is finally reside, most critics argue and agree that a work of literature does possess an appealing aesthetic quality. So this is our more universalized understanding that whatever is, whether beauty is in the eye of beholder, whether beauty is in the is intrinsically or inherently in this object of beauty, wherever is, what attracts to the man to that object, that is the aesthetic quality of the human. So all men are intrinsically, biologically, conditionally are conditioned to the beauty and aesthetics. I want to make it more clear over here that from my definition of beauty never means the beauty of the woman. While distinguishing literature from other forms of writing, this appealing aesthetic quality directly combines to the literature's chief purpose. So keep in mind, any text with certain elements of literariness, and if that text creates an aesthetic sense, creates aesthetic perspective, that aesthetics basically moves the man. Moves means impress the man. While reading a novel we start weeping, so that's the example of moving. So that's the chief purpose of literature, the telling of story, while it may be simultaneously communicate facts. So literature's primary is aim to tell a story, and secondary aim is to communicate facts as well. The subject of this story is particularly describing and detailing a variety of the human experiences, not stating facts are the bits and the pieces of information. So literature is more narrative as well, to tell the story. Story cannot be the real facts. So literature does not, for example, define the word courage. That's the very best example. If you can understand this definition, then you would be definitely having the understanding of literature. For example, it does not define like dictionary that the courage means is to be brave, but it shows us how a courageous character acting courageously, it creates a story, it develops a character, and through the actions of that character or the story we come to know that what does it mean to be a courageous. By so doing, literature characterizes an array of human values, emotions, actions, and ideas in the story form. And it is this considerations that allow us, the readers, to experience vicariously the lives of a host of the characters. Means, for example, if we are reading a poem that might be of the Beowulf, about Beowulf, so we might be having behaving, the dress up of the character, his other attitudes, his social. For example, if when we read about the Beowulf, we come to know that how he behaved the woman, how he behaved the old man, and how he behaved with his other native means colleagues of army who were in his army, how he behaved with those characters as well. We are not just going to know that he was a very warrior and he just very brave in the field of fighting. So we also come to know the value of that character through others interactions with his interaction to other people as well. And then we come to the decision. Through these characters, we observe that the people in action, making decisions, struggling to maintain their humanity, is often inhuman circumstances, and embodying for us a variety of values and human characteristics that we may embrace, discard, enjoy, or detest. So, there might be some detesting situation as well. Means that detest would create. Would definitely be moving us to the some beauty, some reformation, some transformation. So definitely all these can be the central lying element of literature. Is literature then a simple story that contains certain aesthetic and literary qualities that all somehow pleasingly culminate in a work of art? This is another question. That only art is focused on the aesthetics? So to this question, we may say that the literary competence of the readers themselves help determine whether a work should be considered literature or not. It's up to the reader as well. Literature only happens in the mind of the readers. Means if there is a good story, it has all plot, novels, fiction, emotions, but it's not appreciated by the reader. It does not create an aesthetic value on the minds of the reader. It does not move its reader. Then it might not be named as the literature. So literature is more on one side as the literature and on other side as the readers. So it is more up to the will and the mind and the aesthetic sense of the readers that to which piece of literature to piece they named as aesthetics. So if a piece of literature is not able to create the impact on the reader's mind, aesthetics on the reader's mind, then it might not be a literature. So then a literary work may be more functional than ontological. This is the functional sense of the literature, its existence, and therefore its value being determined by its readers, not by the work itself. So overall definition of literature really depends upon the school of criticism which the reader or the critic exposes. They see that this particular text, this particular fiction work is going to create the what sort of impact on the reader's mind. For formalists, for example, the text and the text alone will contain certain qualities that makes a particular piece of writing as literature. Then came after the formalist, then there came the reader response theory, and the reader response critics focus on this, that what is the response of the reader while reading a text or after reading a text. That's the best criticism. So in the interaction and psychological relationship between the text and the reader will help determine whether a document should be deemed as literary. For example, if I read a novel and I consider that novel as the most impressive one for myself, so my response about that text or that novel is very moving one, is very great one, is very loving, but it might not be of no value for you people. Then definitely under the theory of reader response theory, I would be labeling that art as great literature because it has moved, it has created some impact on its reader, which was I. However one decides to define literature, unquestionably this art form provides many hours of pleasure for readers through the imaginative creation of the secondary words where the vehicles of the words means it. What does it? It creates the secondary words. It creates the imaginative creations. It infuses the moralities. If by all these conclusions means through these slides we have been focusing on the different perceptions of literature. I have started from the simple definition of literature as a form of writing until I moved towards the reader response theory of criticism and the literature. With this array of time, with this panorama of discussion, we can come to the conclusion that literature has some particular certain characteristics that might be the story, plot, some characters, some symbols. It may arouse, it may infuse our imagination, it may arouse our aesthetic. It definitely arouse our aesthetic sense. It moves us to be in a secondary word which might not be our real word, but more likely to be our real word. So anything that is written simple with the information and facts cannot be the literature. With this I take permission from you. If you have any question regarding this, you can ask me in the comment section. I would be readily available to answer those questions. Thank you very much.